Hola y buenos días. Soy yo, el señor Morris, el maestro de español. ¿Cómo están todos? Today, we'll look at the names of the oceans and continents in terms for talking about the globe in Spanish, most of which are cognates. But let's go ahead and get started as we always do with our opening song. Canten conmigo. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo se sienten? Yo me siento bien. Hey, good job. You guys have been practicing, huh? Muy bien cantado. Well, I tell you what. Let's go ahead and begin our lesson with a look at the world map. Now, drawing on your vast knowledge of the world, I think that you already know that there are 4 oceans and 7 continents in the world. Ahora vamos a estudiar los océanos y los continentes. We'll begin by looking at the oceans of the world. Now, there are 4 of them, right? And in Spanish, they are el Océano Pacífico, which is over here off this part of the world, and since this is a flat map and it actually wraps around, you'll see that el Océano Pacífico is also over here in this part. Okay? After the Océano Pacífico, we can talk about el Océano Atlántico, and that's this one right here, el Océano Atlántico. Have you heard of that in English? Probably. Up here, where it's very cold, is el Océano Ártico. El Océano Ártico. And that sounds a lot like the Arctic Ocean, right? El Océano Ártico. And then if we look right over here, this is el Océano Índico. El Océano Índico. The Indian Ocean. Ahora vamos a ver los continentes. Now, as you can tell, continentes is a cognate. Hay 7 continentes. We'll start up here with this one. Este es América del Norte. América del Norte. Los Estados Unidos están en América del Norte. Down here we have América del Sur. América del Sur. And using your cardinal directions knowledge, you know that América del Sur is South America. Over here is this large continent. This is Asia. Asia. You can see that it's spelled the same as in English, but it's pronounced a little bit different. Asia. Okay? And then we have Europa. Europa. Right. Again, it looks a lot like Europe, doesn't it? Europa. Then down here we have Africa. Africa. And you see there's an accent mark on that first A, so we stress it. Africa. Yeah. Over here está Australia. Australia. Again, it's spelled the same, but we pronounce it a little bit differently because the pronunciation in Spanish is always consistent. Australia. And down here, right, this bottom one down here, it's all ice and everything. Yeah, there it is. You can see it. That is Antarctica. Antarctica. What we call in English Antarctica. Now, one of the most accurate ways of showing the different places that we've just talked about is by looking at one of these. Este es un globo terráqueo. Un globo terráqueo. Okay? Now, this helps us to find different places on the Earth, and we've developed a system to divide up the globe. Okay? We've said that there are imaginary lines that run around the globe like this. Okay? For example, this line here, and you can see there's another one here and here. There's one up here and here. Okay? They're parallel, meaning that they never touch each other, right? En español son paralelos. Paralelos. Parallels. And that's what we call them in English too, right? Now, here, there's one right in the center. and you can see that when it's a little bit darker, that we use to start counting from when we go either north or south. Do you know what we call this line in English? Do you know what it's called? That's right. The equator in English, en español es el Ecuador. El Ecuador. Now, the equator divide the globe into two almost equal parts. One up here and one down here. Imagine that you cut it right along the equator here. You get two parts. Each part is like half of a ball. Right? In English, we call each one of these a hemisphere. Hemisphere, which comes from the Latin, meaning half a ball. As happens with many of the English words that come from Latin, the word in Spanish is almost the same. Words are cognate, right? So what do we call this half a ball in English? A hemisphere. This half is the northern hemisphere. En español es el hemisferio norte. Right? El hemisferio norte. Well, can you figure out or guess what is this part of the globe called? In English, it's the southern hemisphere. En español es el hemisferio sur. El hemisferio sur. Okay, now in addition to the lines that run around this way, right? Let's imagine that there are some lines running around the globe this way. Right? Well, the lines that run around the globe this way are called meridians in English. In Spanish, we call them meridianos. Meridianos. Okay? Now, the meridianos aren't parallel like these lines that run around here. In other words, they touch. As a matter of fact, they all meet right up here, right? Now, what do we call this place up here where they all meet? In English, we call it the North Pole. Pues en español es el Polo Norte. El Polo Norte. Now, knowing that, can anyone guess what this place is called down here where they all meet? The South Pole in English, that's right. Y en español, el Polo Sur. El Polo Sur. All these cognates make this stuff pretty easy to recognize it if you already know it in English, right? Well, just like there's a starting point with the parallels, right, to count from, there's also a starting point from the meridians. Okay? It's called the prime meridian. And if we look over here, we can find it running right along here. En español es el primer meridiano. Okay, and you may remember from our last unit that primer means first. Well, here's another case where your Spanish and English can work together to help you understanding something. Prime meridian, prime looks like primer, and it means first. So this is where we start counting from. Just like the globe is divided into northern and southern halves, it's also divided into two halves, eastern and western. Okay? Este se llama el hemisferio oriental. Oriental. You may have heard of the Far East, like China and Japan, Korea, referred to as the Orient. Orient. Well, here's another case where your Spanish and English work together to help each other. Esta parte se llama oriental. Esta parte se llama el hemisferio occidental. Okay? Occidental. And occidental is also used in English. In the western part of the United States are some mountains called the Occidental Mountain Range. Yeah. Well, you know what? That was quite a bit of information that we just covered. Why don't we all go ahead now and go over all of that again with this video before we start our activity sheet. Now try to say all of the words as you hear them to practice your pronunciation, okay? Ahora, pongan atención y repitan todos.
Los océanos y los continentes.
el Océano Pacífico, el Océano Atlántico, el Océano Ártico, el Océano Índico, América del Norte, América del Sur, Asia, Europa, África, Australia, Antártida, el Ecuador es uno de los paralelos. El Ecuador divide la Tierra en dos partes: el hemisferio norte y el hemisferio sur. El primer meridiano es uno de los meridianos. Los meridianos pasan por el polo norte y el polo sur. El primer meridiano divide el hemisferio en dos partes: el hemisferio oriental y el hemisferio occidental. Muy bien. That was quite a bit, but if you're familiar with it in English, and I assume that you probably all studied that, it should seem kind of familiar to you because of all the cognates. Well, I tell you what, now, let's go ahead and look at our activity sheet for today. It's called El Globo Terráqueo. And there you go. Go ahead and start off by writing your name. Voy a escribir mi nombre. Roberto. Y mi apellido. Mi apellido es Morris. Apellido is my family name, right? Yeah. Now, the directions say, fill in the following ocean names: Ártico, Índico, Pacífico, Atlántico. Okay? Now, you notice that there are uno, dos, tres, cuatro. There are four names here. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco. There are 5 blanks. Does anybody know why that is? Can you figure out why there are 5 blanks on here? Okay. That's because el Pacífico, Pacífico, remember I said that this actually wraps around, so el Océano Pacífico is over here, but it's also this part here that comes into contact with these parts of Japan, Korea, Russia. Over here es el Pacífico. So you're going to use that word twice. Pacífico. And don't forget to write that accent in there when you're doing that. Okay? Well, now I've used that one. There are 3 more: Ártico, Índico, Atlántico. And you can write those in the blanks remaining. Now the second part says, match the numbers on the map to the continent named below. Okay? You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if we look down here, this one actually is pretty easy because all you're going to have to do is write the number next to the continent. Okay, let's see here. We have América del Sur. See if you can find that one. América del Sur. What number is that going to be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What number are you going to write there for América del Sur? América del Sur is right here. Es el número dos. Okay. So all you're going to have to do is write your numbers next to the continents. Now, down here at the bottom, it says, look at the globes and unscramble the scrambled words to learn the names. Okay. Well, let's look at this one first. This is pointing to this line right here. What is that line called in Spanish? Do you remember? Well, it's called el Ecuador. E-Cu-A-Dor. And does that use all the letters? E-Cu-A-Dor. So, el Ecuador is this one right here. This one down here is the word that describes these lines that don't touch each other, and the imaginary lines that go around the globe that way. See if you can figure that out. Over here, we're going to talk about a couple of things. This one is pointing to el polo, what? What is that going to be? El polo norte. El polo norte, and did I use all my letters? N-O-R-T-E, norte. This one is pointing to this line right here, and it's the something meridiano. The something meridiano. Can you unscramble that word to describe what this is? And then this one is pointing to right down there, el polo what? Rus. Can you unscramble that? Okay. There you go. And you can also see that there are a couple of lines on this one here that we talked about. And those are some of the lines that you named down at the bottom. Do you remember what those are called? This will give you a good chance to review your English as well as learning your Spanish. Okay, today we really covered a lot of information. Now you can continue to review this information by asking each other questions or playing games in your class. Maybe you can make like Jeopardy. I've heard of teachers who have the students write the questions out and the answers. Then they all put their questions together and the teacher asks the questions, like Jeopardy. Okay, so you can try that. Now next class, we'll continue to talk about the different places of the world and maybe some about the different types of weather. What's the weather like where you are today? For our goodbye song, let's sing one of my favorites called La Bamba. Canten conmigo. Para bailar la bamba, para bailar la bamba, se necesita una poca de gracia. Una poca de gracia pa' ti, pa' mí, ahí arriba y arriba. Ahí arriba y arriba, por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré. Bamba, bamba, help me out now. Bamba, bamba. Yo no soy marinero. Yo no soy marinero, soy capitán, soy capitán, soy capitán. Help me out now, here we go. Bamba, bamba, do it again now. Bamba, bamba, a little bit softer now. A little bit softer. I'll see you next class. Adiós, hasta luego.